Minimal taxes. Okay. And they're going to get less money than I thought they were going to get. It's just a lot. Are they paying for your flight? Yeah.
Yeah, it's based on the Bacteria in the name of this guy.
Doesn't mean base.
So you've been to the place that it's based on?
Those are good. My dad loves a place called El Rey. It's called El Rey. They have the best carnitas. Oh, it's like in the hood, and it's like always go. It's like lock your doors when you pull out, but it's good.
Slash, I don't think they could handle me at Chipotle because my
It's so much fun.
alright.
It's their first day. It's their first day. They don't know.
Exactly. I can't. And the last time I went to Chipotle, the lady was just like, "You just should not be here." Because I was like, there's a black bean. Can you not use those? Can you not use rice? Can you not give me lettuce? Why are you putting that salt in it?
So what do you get?
But it's like, okay, don't give me like, she had like kidney beans.
Yeah, it's like
What is that?
You just totally
I know.
skip the first 4 other stations.
I know, but just do you see why I go to Chipotle? Because this just isn't. I don't know. Well, not
Look at this one.
Chipotle is so cool. But that's what's cool in high school. It's when you grow up. And then when you grow up, you realize that, oh, that's right. Well,
I hate him.
although I will say, they have a good deal for Chipotle when you cater. That's what they go for. For catering. I think I remember we ordered from like
What's bad about black beans?
I don't know if there's anything bad about it. I just don't eat it.
Okay. I was just wondering. But there's something I don't know.
There is on the street there, I know. Am I surprised? I'm going, but you better not tell me that.
I'm not gonna dump that.
First, if you're gonna dress up,
When is it?
when you want to be here.
Hey.
I never thought about that.
Well, I'm gonna.
Awkward part. Lead to that.
talking about for cancers, it's like really bad.
Yeah,
And plastic is like really dangerous.
exactly, and that's what I know.
I just don't, I
It's a
can't
lot
wrap
that
my head. Yeah. It's like 100% mortality.
It's like reverse, it equals to a reversion of differentiation in cells.
Oh, that's why it's so bad. Oh yeah, pleomorphic. Is that what that means?
I think it's like the more differentiated cells, the less dangerous it is.
Yeah, because this one's like going
Right.
backward.
But if it's like reverted in the cell, then it can become like really weird.
Mhm.
Cells with a lot of problems.
It also has like final.
MEN2 involved in follicular carcinoma, but MEN1 is something else.
What is that like?
What are the
Cancer in multi-organs. Like, I think we know.
Yeah,
I think the Tom. Oh shoot, for a second.
she what?
I guess she talked about it in our history group, like explained
Oh,
everything.
MEN1 is with like some hormone secreting tumors, and 2A and 2B is with follicular carcinomas. There's some protein things.
They're tumors and estrogens. Obviously.
Well, yeah, that makes sense, I guess. No.
But it was like raining, and so I was like, oh.
PPP, P3,
This one says MEN2A and 2B are medullary carcinoma. Oh, okay.
pituitary, parathyroid, pituitary, and feel.
Okay, just there.
Wikipedia says that MEN2A is parathyroid, medullary,
I just feel like I have a conference call tomorrow for our upcoming conference. Oh, no, no, yes, I actually have it. Actually, they're good. I read some of the other ones.
just registered today. So what I did was, had to modify this 50 billion terms.
Yes, I printed out the other.
So this one is, as a 345 we're good. Yep, that's fine. So this one, because we have an odd number, 13 has 3. And what they can do is decide they're gonna all have to interview one other person, but they can decide which disease is more interesting to them. I mean, they have a choice. And then I just assigned everybody to a team. There's 10 teams. So everybody's on a team. So any crazy questions, just send them to me. Okay, everybody doing pretty good so far? Yeah. I'm going to tell them, don't ask you for duplicates, it's on here. Don't ask you about extended deadlines, because it ain't going to happen. Don't ask about A pluses, because I don't give them, because everything is open book. A plus is reserved for people who do extraordinary stuff. It's not extraordinary or anything, but that open book stuff. So, your job is just mainly just to, like police, to make sure they know that if they're running 10 minutes late, they can't come in. And then I'm going to pass this around and just have them sign it every week, and figure out how to tell it to everyone. Because it's such a concentrated class, I changed it from 3 absences to 2. Any questions for me? Now, does it make sense? Did you look at everything? Did you get something to flow? Okay.
I went through all of them.
It was good? Informative? Too basic, too advanced?
No, I think it's
Good? Would you tell me if you didn't think so? Yeah. Well, I don't know if this is my last class. I resigned today. They want me to stay on with the school, but I'm going back home to North Carolina. So they're trying to decide how I can still teach big class. Just have a seat anywhere. Have a good time. I have a summer it's a government thing. It's a summer scholar. But he may come in. He's a really sweet guy. He just finished his bachelor's today. How are you? Oh, okay. Okay. What's your name? Sarah. Oh, yes. Hi. So I've got, okay. Yeah, I have it. I'll email you, when will you have access?
I submitted everything.
Within the next 48 hours? I'll do it tonight. Yeah, that's fine. I'll do it when I get home. If I don't do it tonight, I'll do it first thing in the morning. You're not going to miss anything. Okay? There's a quiz next week that I'm posting online, and it's open resource, so you can flip through it. So be helpful. I will go over what team you're in. You need to team project, you're gonna actually do a big team project, and then you're gonna do how to do a pedigree, like interviewing skills with a partner. And so I think you're with the group that's got 3 people. Let me see. And that's actually the cool group. When you get on the website, and I'll go through this in class, you'll see the different family histories. You're with you're with the 3 groups. So everybody else has got an assigned partner. Your group has 3 people, so within your group you can decide which of those can like. So you have to do a pedigree on Fabry disease. That's a given. Okay. But then the other 2, whichever one you find more interesting, you can do the pedigree on it. You don't have to write a paper, but you can do a pedigree on it. Okay. It's not hard. And then the team, I think I put you on the full team, so you left out. They're all full, but I like listening a lot. You're gonna do cloning, which is a cool project. So you'll be good. Hey. I register. Yeah, so you can't access either, right? Right. Right. That's fine. So what I'll do is, if I don't get to it tonight, since it's so late, I'll do it first thing in the morning. Neither one of you panic. Okay. Seriously. I'll email you the first module and these documents in the syllabus. The only thing you really need to worry about is just reviewing the family history module. There'll be a quiz that's posted next week. You have to whatever day it says to do it, and it's open resource. All the quizzes are open resource. The final is open resource. Okay? I'm not all about seeing what you know, because I don't know it all. It's about accessing resources. Okay? We'll go through it all. We'll be all right. Okay. You're going to be in the uncool group. No, you're not in the uncool group. And your sheet is actually good. Your family, right? Yeah. So I put you in there because you'll see that a lot in your kids. And then, I don't know what your pedigree is. Thank you. Very nice. Happy Monday, everybody. Let's get started. I got 30 minutes to go over the syllabus, and then our first lecturer is going to be here. I'm Tracy Andrews. You don't have to call me Dr. Andrews. I'm just Tracy. My mom didn't name me Dr. Emily's mom named her doctor, not me. It's going to be a fun class. I know, how many of you are scared of genetics? Probably all of you. It's not bad. My job is to make this interesting as much as possible and to incorporate genetics into your clinical knowledge base, because all of it's going to be applicable to all of you in a clinical setting. And also my job is to make it fun so you actually remember it and not listen to it during REM sleep in class. Having said that, I only have 2 requirements. Be respectful of lecturers, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And just do your assignments, and you'll get an A. And we'll talk about that again in a few minutes. And I mean that. If you do what you're supposed to do, everybody in here, last semester, everybody made an A. So my job is not to stump you, to give you hard tests, but to give you information that you can use. But at the same time, explain why it's clinically important. There used to be a different structuring of the course. I've restructured it significantly for a reason, and we'll go through that in just a minute. Every week we're going to do attendance. There's too many people in here to call names, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass this around. Since it's the first day, if you'll just check to make sure you're on the roster and just initial it or check over here, and then on the blank page papers, don't take up the whole page like my granddaughter would. Just write your name small. I'm a little tired today. I just got back at 2 o'clock. We just did a Disney World trip for a week. So I'm a little 5-year-old out. So let's go through the syllabus real quick. Well, before we do that, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm the clinical director of aortic surgery here at Columbia Medical Center for 2 more months. I resigned today. I'm going back home to North Carolina to become director of mitral surgery in North Carolina, and also do heart failure. My job here is a little unique. I work with one surgeon, and I medically manage all the patients by myself. I function basically as a super fellow or an attending. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's not good. And we see patients with aortic conditions like Marfan's, Ehlers-Danlos, stuff like that. I'm not going to be able to talk about it because it's a very abbreviated summer session, but usually I do a cardiac surgery lecture. If you want to meet like on a Saturday or something in Starbucks, I'll be more than happy to do that for you on the side. I have been in the medical field for 22 years. I know I look like I'm 25, but I'm not. And a lot of people say, well, you're in cardiac surgery. Why in the name of God would you do genetics? It has nothing to do with cardiac surgery. Genetics is very, very, very strong in cardiac surgery conditions. Bicuspid aortic valve disease is something I see every day. It has a strong genetic component. Cardiomyopathies, coronary artery disease, familial hypercholesterolemia, it goes on and on and on. And then people think that you only deal with cardiac surgery, but that's not true either. People who do cardiac surgery or any surgery have to be very well versed in medicine too, because we don't just take care of their heart, we take care of everything that comes along with them. So if they have neurological issues, I have to know about that. I have to do genetic counseling sometimes for multiple things, not just cardiac surgery. And then, bottom line, I'm a geek, so I like genetic stuff. So when I was here and did my doctorate, I did the clinical subspecialty in genetics, and it branched from there. Dr. Cook, who was the vice dean who retired just recently, she asked me to teach this class, and now I'm the sole instructor for the master's level, and they just asked me to do the doctorate level, and we're working on seeing if I could possibly do it from long distance. I don't know how that'll work, but we'll see. So that's me. I'm a Duke grad, so if you're a Carolina fan, just please don't tell me, because I may have to take that back about the A. And that's it. So this course is a little different than probably what you've seen before. That's okay. Attendance is important for the lecturers. It's a big class, so that's good. The lecturers like full classrooms. So for us, you can miss 2 you can have 2 absences without any penalties. Just let me know if you're going to be out, or if you just email me and say, Tracy, I'm not going to be there. You don't have to go into why that you got shark bitten or anything. Just let me know that you're not going to be here beforehand. And if you have to miss a 3rd one and you have like some credible reason, then we can work that out. But 2 is the maximum without penalty. You're going to write 1 small paper, and I'll show you an example of that in a minute. You're going to do 2 pedigrees. We'll talk about all the assignments very specifically in a minute. There's an article, the Bennett article. You can model your pedigrees from that. You can also use the module for pedigree building. Either one, whichever one works best for you. The Bennett article, I think, was written during the Shakespearean times, the way some of the language is. So if the module works better for you, you can do that, okay? The Proban and the Consultan, that's just, and our guest speaker will talk about that in just a few minutes. All you have to do is draw an arrow to show who brought the condition to your attention. We'll talk about the paper in a second. You're going to do a team project. How many of you love team projects? None. If you've been like me, you always get the team who goes, I don't know what to do. And then you're the one, because you're OCD, does the whole thing, right? And you're at Columbia, so I know that's the case. Well, I've fixed it so you don't have to do that, and I'll show you how. These projects are actually really fun. I think that people who are in advanced practice should present. I think it's part of our professional duty to teach forward. So that's what you're going to do, at least in this class. I've assigned you to groups. Some of these conditions are not very well known at all. Some of them are cool. Some of them are more common than others. And some of them you're going to be like, why in the name of the world did she ask us to do that? And I'll explain after you do it. There's a rubric that explains everything you have to do. If you have everything in that rubric, you're good to go. And then I'll show you about how we're going to prevent your classmates from not putting the whole workload on you. You're going to do has everybody looked at the website who can access it? There's 4 modules. You're going to review those at your leisure, wherever that may be. And then we're going to have a quiz on each one of them. The quizzes are open resource, meaning you can have the module beside you while you do the quiz. Having said that, well, actually, let me back up. How many of you would prefer it open resource versus closed? And the reason I ask that, if any of you aspire to an A+, tell me now. Because if you want an A+, everything's going to be closed resources. If you want just a strictly A, we'll do open resource. An A+ means that you do something extraordinary. I don't find it extraordinary that you can make an A+ by having things right at your fingertips. That's kind of like second grade level. If you could, it would be bad if you can't make 100 in here if you have the answers in front of your face. And I've actually had students challenge me on that. But I got everything right. Of course you did, because you had it right there. So if you are dying to have an A+, the class can do it closed resource. If you're okay with an A, then everything will be open. Okay? Because my job is not to see what you know by rote memory, but to let you have the resources and be able to refer back to it later. That, to me, is true learning. You can think about it, and as a class, decide what you want to do. The first one's going to be pedigree and family history gathering. The second is basic science principles of genetics. I think as clinicians, it's important for everybody to understand basic science. My favorite is the pharmacogenomics. It talks about how genomics and genetics affect the medicines that we take. And then ethics and legislation like the GINA law, and then different bioethical considerations related to genetics. They're very short modules. They're not bad. And then you'll do the quiz. The final exam is also potentially open resource if you want it to be. There's a discussion board where you'll find 2 articles. They don't have to be very academic. They don't both have to be peer-reviewed or a Cochrane review kind of article. It could be something from ABC that you saw about the mass production of genetic tests and how that affects consumers. Anything about genetics that you're interested in, you find an article, you post just how to find it. If somebody wanted to look at it online and talk about just a little bit, a snippet about what you read in it and why you found it interesting, and then people will respond to different postings. You have to respond to 2 of your peers' postings. So in all, you'll do 4 postings on the discussion board. And I do that so you become a little more immersed in genetics beyond just academic stuff, so you see what's going on from a media perspective. Next week, there's a company called DNA 11 where you can do mouth swabs, and they actually do artwork for you. I have 2 paintings that I'm going to bring in that I had done, because again, I'm a geek, to show you what they do. And then I posted the thing on there before about how to make music with your DNA stuff, which this was geeky, but still. And then these are some readings. As we go along with the guest speakers, you'll be able to follow along in the textbook. These are the modules. family history is the first one, and then the second one is the basic information. The third is the pharmacogenomics, and then the ethics is the last one. So each of you have been assigned, and the reason I did this because last semester, 2 minutes before the paper was due, I couldn't find a partner, and so they didn't want to do it. So I've now taken the liberty to assign everybody a condition and a partner. So everybody is going to be required to do a pedigree on your condition, and I will pull up the first one, Catch-22. We used to have everybody do a real pedigree from your own family. After thinking about that, I found that to be way too intrusive. I did that myself. I mean, I don't have anything to hide personally, but some people don't want to disclose anything. So we made mock ones. Sometimes if you're a guy, you're going to be a girl in this. Just go with it. Another way around. And it's going to give you your family history. And when you talk to your partner, just act it out. You tell them how old you are and your family history, and then your partner, based on how you present it, is going to create a pedigree. And then you're going to create a pedigree for yourself as well. Then at the bottom, there are some specific questions for your condition. You're going to write your paper reflecting the answers to these questions. Some of these are not going to be applicable to your conditions. If there's not a geographical bias, just say there's no known geographical biases. You don't have to flip out and say, I can't find it. Just say it's not applicable. Some, like malignant hyperthermia, there's definitely a geographical bias. So don't say there's not one, because I'll know that there is one. So you're going to write a 3 to 5 page paper. It doesn't have to be your thesis or anything like that, just addressing these conditions. You do not have to write a paper on your partner's condition, just your own. Okay? So after you do your first pedigree, you're going to do your own so you can play with it, and then you're going to submit that to me, and then I'm going to grade it. And then if there's any issues with it, I'll show you where you need to improve. And then for your partner's pedigree, you're going to do a second one, and then you'll be done with pedigrees, and then you'll write a paper. And for your team project, so there's 9 conditions, and all of the conditions are listed here. So if you lose your paper that gives your pedigree, you just go online to the resources part and find it again. Because I was sending them like every other day, and that got old really quick. So here's the rubric for what your team is going to look for, and it'll set like the name of the condition, and it goes through everything you need for the presentation. While you're presenting, your team is presenting, I will be grading you, and you will have your grade by the end of your presentation. So it's not going to be like a 15-year wait to know how you did. We were going to do it the last 2 days of class, but Jill Goldman, who is Lee Goldman's wife, can only speak on the 22nd, so we're going to do some the week before and then the last week. We're going to do five teams each week. So to help prevent people from not doing what they're supposed to, everybody's going to, when you meet with your teams, you're going to divide up the workload of whatever presentation you have. And then you're going to have, you can either have a team leader or not. Sometimes that doesn't work because the team leader gets too cocky and people start fighting. Or you could try to be democratic about it. List all of your team members and what you're supposed to do. And then confidentially, you're going to submit this to me, not the TA, so you don't feel like it's going to be an issue. And you're going to give everybody in your team, including yourself, a grade about how they did. and I want you to be honest. If you have, and nobody's going to know, if you have a weak team member, it's not fair to you or anybody in your team to say that they made a perfect 5 or whatever the score is when they didn't do anything. And that's the way to safeguard yourself. If they, let's say that their job is to do the first 3 slides and they don't do them, don't do them for them. Leave that blank. And when they present, they'll have to explain to the class why it wasn't done. As a whole, the class, your team won't suffer for it. Only the person who didn't do their part will suffer for it. Okay? Peer pressure goes a long way. There's an explanation on how to decide if somebody needs a 4 or a 3. You can't vote like on The Voice through different kind of medias or anything like that. Guest lecturers will always be here. These are the first 2 presentations. The speaker today will be here this week as well as next week. So every speaker who wants to give slides, I'll post them before. Some speakers don't like to give slides beforehand. They'll just have you take notes. Some speakers don't like to pass out any at all. So you just have to take notes. And then some will give them after the fact because they don't want you reading. So if they're not posted, it's not that I've forgotten. It's just that that particular lecturer has his or her own madness. The final exam is going to be not from the book. I'll tell you that now. It will be from your team presentations as well as what's on the lectures. So for today, you were supposed to review Module 1, and that'll be done. On the 17th, I'll post the first quiz before class, and then you'll have till the 24th to get it done. And then you'll have your grade by the 25th. Everything will be posted in the grade book, so you can check your grades that way. Everything is listed for you on the calendar. Please don't email me and ask when something is due. Everything's on here. Okay? The TA will field most of the questions for me, but please don't ask her for extensions for assignments because she's going to ask me and I'm going to say no. Don't ask her to replace any documents. All the documents are listed here for you. You could tell her you're not going to be here. If there's major issues, you obviously can call me. I could give you my cell phone number as well if you'd like, or email me, and I'll help you any way I can. Now, the last thing that's very important to me is being respectful of guest lecturers. We have the luxury of being at Columbia University. You're the cream of the crop. You don't get into Columbia by mistake. And as a result of that, we have very high caliber speakers. Dr. Chung is one of the most renowned, and I'm not just saying that, most world-renowned genetic physicians in the world. And she comes to speak to us, which I could find a complete honor that she does that. So it really annoys me when people come in 35 minutes late and are sitting there eating potato chips during her lecture to the point where you can't hear her talk. That annoys me. So if you know you're going to be late, you need to let me know now, and we'll work something out, because if you come in more than 10 minutes late, I'm going to walk you back out the door. I find it completely rude for people to be climbing over top of each other, throwing their books around. There's nobody in here who has a busier schedule than me, I assure you of that, and I find time to be here. If you can't be here, just don't come in that day. If you talk, I will escort you out as well. There's nothing that needs to be talked about during the class. I mean, you know, if you say, oh, that's cool, I'm not going to kick you out for that, but if you have a full-blown conversation, and I've seen it happen, I mean, that's just rude. If you're going to have a full-blown conversation, then everybody can go out in the hallway and talk about it and then come back. I think that's fair. That's it. It's a very straightforward class, and if you do the modules and stuff like that, you'll have an A, or maybe an A+ if you want to do it closed resources. What questions do you have for me? Yes, ma'am.
I'm just a little confused with the partners. You do your pedigree, and then the partner does their own pedigree separately, and then so you don't actually work with the partner directly.
Yes, you do. So you're going to have, instead of you actually having to do a family, you're going to do 2 pedigrees during the course of the semester. You're going to do, so let's say, I don't know your name, so I'm just going to say you're Rachel, and you have condition 1 catch 22. So you're going to write a pedigree based on your family history. The family history, if you go under files and resources, and the mock family histories, you just find catch 22, and so this is your family history. So based on this family history, you're going to draw a pedigree. You're going to say, okay, I'm a 40-year-old lady, and you're married to a 52-year-old Caucasian guy, and then you're going to draw all this stuff based on that. Some of it may be extraneous. I throw stuff in there just because sometimes. Sometimes it's just to make it more complete. And then you fill it in that way. So that's pedigree 1. And then you're going to turn that in. You could start interviewing your pedigree person, partner before then if you want, but just to make sure that everything's okay, some people like to wait. So if you're Rachel, I'm not saying you are, but if you are, your partner is Sylvia, and she has PKU, and then you're going to talk to her, and she's going to tell you, she's not going to read it from her paper, she's going to say, okay, I'm a 22-year-old girl, and I'm married to this, and then based on what she's telling you, because you don't want to read her paper, because you might as well just do your own that way, you want to, because when you talk to a family member or a patient, they don't have this stuff written down. And sometimes the way they say it, you have to interpret what they're trying to tell you. And that's why I want you to actually work with partners, because you guys can embellish a little bit and you can make it the way you want. You can sound like you're from South Carolina and you're, or whatever you want. To see how well your partner can get a family history. I've had people say, well, he dropped dead from a heart attack. And then when you get to talking to them, they actually had long QT syndrome, and it wasn't a heart attack, they had arrhythmias. So you have to get into the language of it. This is just a little exercise to get you used to doing family histories. So you're going to interview your patient or your partner for that, and then write the second pedigree based on your partner's history. Then you're going to do the paper on catch 22 or whatever your condition is. You don't have to answer any questions about your partner's stuff, like clinical questions, just the pedigree. Okay? I swear it's not as hard as it sounds. It's actually pretty easy. What other questions do you have? Everybody's good? Yes?
When the team presentations are about conclusions,
The team presentations, I'll show you the topic. So, and after you leave here, you can see the guys who just signed up today. I'm going to email you this, so don't anybody hyperventilate. I don't have any bags here. So team 1 is going to be Tay-Sachs disease. These are different than the pedigree stuff that you're doing. One team's going to do Tay-Sachs, one's going to do Pompe, Turner syndrome, sickle cell is a really important one genetically. Dolly the sheep is not a genetic condition, but it's really important to understand how cloning came to be and why it's important to us clinically. For all of you anesthesia people, malignant hyperthermia. Polycystic kidney disease doesn't sound like it would be a big deal genetically, but it's actually a huge deal. And when we talk about it in class, I'll probably add a little bit more to it. And it's important to, it doesn't matter if you're peds, newborn, anesthesia, whatever. Polycystic kidney disease is a huge, huge deal for everybody. And then Duchenne. So those are the 10 conditions that we're going to talk about. The Harlequin one is probably the most heartbreaking. It always makes me cry. But it's very interesting, and it adds a lot of ethical stuff to it. A lot of them add ethical stuff to it. But I have not yet seen a team not knock this out of the water. All you guys always do amazing jobs presenting these things. And so that's what you guys will do it from a team perspective. And on the calendar, it'll say when everything is due. Okay, so you want to start working on an outline and stuff like that. And I've worked on this as the class has grown. It started out with 52, now we're up to 67. So I've modified this 100 times. I wanted to keep this up to date before the class actually started, so you could get working on it sooner than later, because this is such an abbreviated class. As you go along, please don't feel like I'm not accessible. If you have questions like I don't know how to cite something, or I don't know how we should do the slides, I'll be more than happy to help you with that. I'm not going to write it for you, but like if you need help, that's what I'm here for too, though, okay? Yes, ma'am.
I'm not on the teams or the pedigree card.
Are you on the roster?
I haven't received it yet. I mean,
Have you registered?
yeah, I registered this like I can access the course right now.
You can?
Yeah.
What is your name?
Amanda Shipka, CHI.
Okay, I'll make sure you're on here. Everybody who's on my list is on here, but I'm not. See, you're not on the team, so you have to get kicked out. No, I'll take care of it. Is everybody look through here, and if you don't see your name, just let me know and I'll add you somewhere. After you review the syllabus and you look at the pedigree stuff and the team presentations, if you have any questions, just either email me or the TA. I try to answer you back within 24 hours. If I don't, it means I'm dead. So please have mercy if I'm dead. No, seriously. I know I hate to wait. It may not be instantaneously, but I'll answer you back within 24 hours, okay?
We can provide like a list of these people's emails, so if we don't know who these people are, we can find them, or we can.
That's where you go to columbia.edu and look up their uni or their name. Yep, you can do that. Yep, that's a good question. You could go to Columbia, because I've had students sign Love Sarah or Love Annie, and I have no idea what their last name is, so I'd take their uni and then find who they are. Yeah, you could just go on columbia.edu and it'll give your email addresses. I tried to make it so everybody could access it through the mail feature, but it won't let me because you're students, which is crazy. But if you can't find it, just email me and I'll do that. But you can find anybody on there. And when you meet as a team, you can exchange emails too. Any other questions? This is going to be a great class. This is our first lecture. She has amazing timing, right? This is Julia. Are you doing this
Actually,
one?
I have a slightly different set, but it's fine.
Here you go. This is Julia Wentz. She's one of our genetic counselors here. She is an amazing speaker. She's going to talk to you this week and next week. So I'm going to turn it over to her. I'm going to go sit in the back so I'm out of the way, but I'll be here for after class if you have questions, okay?
And this runs until
6:50-ish. 50-ish.
So I switched it around, and I hope that doesn't mess too many people up. So I know you guys get a package on pedigree taking, and so I'm actually going to start off with taking a pedigree, and then next week I'm going to go over a little bit more of the history of genetics and that type of information, because I think you guys end up having to start taking a pedigree before this, and taking a pedigree makes sense without knowing the history of genetics. So I just have my campus-approved security thing, and I have to get into this. And it really hasn't changed from if you guys have the pedigree construction analysis slides. These slides haven't changed, so open this up. So as she said, I'm a genetic counselor. Just for you who haven't run into a genetic counselor in your career, in your lives, it's a master's program, so we all have undergraduate degrees in biology, psychology, that type of thing. And then we do 2 years of master's degree training, and then we're certified through the American Board of Genetic Counselors. So just kind of give you an idea of what's going on there. And I've been here for about 7 years, and I've practiced. You will see genetic counselors working in cancer, prenatal, pediatrics, adult, research. So you kind of see of us in many, many fields, and as genetics encroaches on many other fields of medicine, you will see us more and more. So to begin with, what is family history? It's a genetic tool. It helps us to determine not only what's going on in that individual, as well as to understand risks for that individual based on their family history. So it really is something that it really can tell us a lot and give us a lot of information about what that patient is at risk for, and isn't something that is always utilized as much as it could be. So why focus on the family history? And everybody's using this in genetics right now. So Angelina Jolie, she herself did not have any cancer, but she herself was at increased risk because of her family history. Her mother passed away from ovarian cancer, I believe, and I believe her aunt, her mother's sister, just also recently passed away from cancer. And it was something that turned out to be hereditary form of breast and ovarian cancer. And she understood her risk because she knew her family history, and her healthcare providers knew her family history. And so, while you wouldn't think that she herself was at any type of increased risk for cancer at a young age and needed to follow anything other than the normal guidelines for getting a mammogram, when in fact, if you looked at her family history, you knew that her risk was actually much higher than the general population woman's risk. And so, there are a lot of different diseases, and it's really many different things that, knowing someone's family history, you understand what they're at risk for. And some of the things, the most common things you'll run across are type 2 diabetes. Well, we don't know of one strong genetic factor that for most individuals that cause type 2 diabetes. If your mother and your uncle and your sibling have type 2 diabetes, the chance of you developing type 2 diabetes is higher than someone who has no family history of it. And so knowing, and then you can then have a discussion with the patient about this risk and things that can lower their risk of developing it. And so without knowing someone's family history, you can't have a comprehensive session with someone and counsel them about what their risks are for different types of conditions. So we're just going to start off with constructing a pedigree. When I talk about making a pedigree and all these pedigree symbols, this is probably overkill for what you guys will use in your regular practice, but it's really more so when someone comes to you with a pedigree, or if they've been seen by a genetic counselor, you can interpret that the pedigree that's been created, as well as there's a certain level of family history that you can take and you can construct in a pedigree. Probably, it's overkill what I'm showing you here, but it's definitely something that you guys will be able to use in practice and you will see in practice. Okay, so I'm just going to start off with the basic symbols. I think you guys got a handout with this as well. The very basic of it is that males are represented with squares, females are represented with circles, and sex unknown is represented with a diamond. And there are circumstances where someone's pregnant, you don't know their sex, and so you use a diamond. You don't know the sex of the fetus, or more distant relatives will use that shorthanded. You color in or scribble in for people who are affected in the family. And then there's kind of different types of shorthand as you're creating a pedigree that you may use. So a number inside the symbol indicates the number of individuals. So for example, in the third line down in the middle, that indicates 5 girls. within the symbol. If the number is below the symbol, it indicates the age of the individual. And I'm going to go into more detail with all of these. The one thing at the bottom there is proband and consultant. So we indicate on the pedigree the proband, the affected individual, with an arrow pointing to the symbol, and the proband we color in as the affected individual. Sometimes it's not always the proband that brings the family to your attention. So for example, I might be Angelina Jolie. I myself do not get colored in because I don't have disease, but my mother gets colored in. She becomes the proband. I'm the consultant. I came to you because of my mother's family history, and so you can draw an arrow to my symbol, and you can color in my mom. And there'll be examples of that, but just that one thing to distinguish. And a pregnancy, a termination of a pregnancy or abortion of a pregnancy or a miscarriage of a pregnancy is indicated through a triangle. Okay. So again, like I said. So affected. Most classically, in someone who's exhibiting symptoms of the disease of interest, you color them in Foley. There are other ways to indicate people who are affected when you know more about their genetic test result. So on the bottom here, non-penetrant carrier may manifest disease. If we go back to Angelina Jolie, she would actually get, since we now know that she's gene positive and she's at risk to develop breast cancer or ovarian cancer, she would get a line through her because we genetically know that she's positive, but she herself has not manifested any type of disease yet. So another example of that would be something like, it's many of the cancer syndromes, it's more the adult onset condition. So for a Huntington's family, Huntington's is a severe neurological condition that everybody, if you have the mutation for it, you do eventually develop the disease. It starts with this chorea, the shaking, it develops into a progressive neurological disease, and eventually you die from it in your 50s. But for that, it's an autosomal dominant condition, so a parent is affected. You can test the children to see whether or not they carry the gene, and the children who do not yet show symptoms would have a line through them. The next group down is an obligate carrier will not manifest disease. So we'll go into more inheritance patterns, but these are things you might have heard of are cystic fibrosis. You can be a carrier of cystic fibrosis, and you yourself will never have disease, but you're at increased risk to have a child affected with cystic fibrosis. And that's how you indicate a carrier. And then finally, affected or a proband is colored in. But there could be multiple individuals in your pedigree, not just the proband, who are affected with disease, so there may be multiple people colored in. This is when you get really fancy with something. So when you're dealing with a condition where there are multiple ways that it can be expressed or someone can have symptoms of it, you can use a kind of a key to represent the different symptoms of it. So this is looking at a condition called neurofibromatosis, or NF. And individuals with neurofibromatosis can have different types of skin lesions that are associated with it, as well as benign tumors. And so this is indicating, and as well as Lisch nodules, which are little spots in the iris of the eye. And so this is indicating all of these individuals have neurofibromatosis, but they're expressing it differently. And for this pedigree, we wanted to be very detailed about who had what symptoms. So rather than just coloring everybody in and writing it below what symptoms they had, this was taken more carefully, and we indicated what symptoms each person had by coloring it in differently. You frequently see this used as well when we're talking about hereditary cancer conditions. So for example, a breast and ovarian cancer family, you might use one color in the upper right-hand corner for breast cancer and color in the lower left-hand corner for ovarian cancer. You want to try to keep it consistent within kind of the disease that you're tracking within the family. So you don't really need to do this for so a lot of people have heart disease in the family, a lot of people have type 2 diabetes, but that might not be the reason why the family's there for the genetic indication, and so you don't really want to spend a lot of time coloring everybody in who has type 2 diabetes when they're there because their kid has cleft lip and palate. So you can go overkill on this, use this for the disease of interest that the family came to you for. This is just, so this is starting to now linking our symbols together to make a pedigree. When you have a line that runs horizontally between two symbols and it connects them in that way, then that's indicating a union. And we use this not just for marriage, we indicate this for any type of union. A line through it indicates that they're no longer together. Consanguinity indicates, so a double line indicates consanguinity, that there's somehow blood relation. And then you can use multiple unions. So this is someone, she was no longer involved with that partner, and now she's with this partner. And that is something that we use a lot. Children. So this is now indicating, so you want to kind of pay attention to how the lines are drawn. So you can see the union of the parents, it's a horizontal line. And then when you have children, you have a vertical line coming down, a horizontal line, and then 2 lines coming down to the top of the symbol. So just, I mean, it's not too tricky, but you can easily start to forget to not link your children together, and then your children, your brothers and sisters can start to look like they're a union and things like that. So just be cautious of kind of how you're linking your lines together. But that's the upper right-hand corner is where I'm looking at there. So that's showing children. You can also indicate infertility with a double line at the bottom. There's twins in here, which are linked together like that. If you know the zygosity of them, that they are identical, you link them together. If you know they're dizygotic, you put a little D in the middle. And if you don't know, which for most, I mean, more people know now in terms of their zygosity. And then adoption here over here. So if you're adopted out of the family, it's still a solid line down from your biological parents and then a bracket around you. If you're adopted into the family and you're not biologically related, it's a dashed line down and then brackets around you. And you'll see these all used pregnancy. A pregnancy where you do not know the sex of the fetus is indicated with a diamond, and then you put a P in the middle of the symbol. If you know the sex of the pregnancy, you can go ahead and actually draw the symbol as the sex is known and still put a P in the middle of the symbol. So if they know it's a girl, I can draw a circle and put a P in the middle. And then all the different types of pregnancies that don't go to term. So miscarriages or spontaneous abortion is sometimes how it's abbreviated SAB. A termination of a pregnancy, you put a line through it, and you'll see that line through something also indicates death in an individual, in a person rather than a fetus. And then here, termination of an affected pregnancy, obviously the symbol's colored in because that pregnancy was affected. If a baby is full term, then you no longer use a triangle, and rather you use a diamond. I have to tell you, I frequently have to look these up, but these are just fun to know about how all of this works, and we use it increasingly more. So how this works is if there is a vertical line going down from the individual, that's who carried the pregnancy, and then everything else is indicating where the genetics came from. So in this particular, in the upper right-hand corner there, you have a donor sperm, and the egg came from mom, and she carried the pregnancy. In this case, you have a donor sperm, a donor egg. Is that how? Yeah, surrogate. S stands for surrogate. You have a donor egg, and the surrogate carried the pregnancy, and it came from dad's sperm. Actually, I want to correct that. See, I do have to look these up every time. In this case, the egg and the sperm came from mom, and it was just a surrogate. So they took eggs from me, they took sperm from my husband, and they put it all in someone else to make the pregnancy, but it's not genetically related to the surrogate. Here we have a donor egg and mom and dad with the pregnancy. And here we have a donor egg, dad's sperm, and the donor egg person was also the surrogate. So the short answer of all this is the vertical line coming down from that individual is who carried the pregnancy. Okay. So beginning to take a family history. And it's easier to watch someone do this than to explain how to do it, but we'll do our best here. So I tend to start with the proband or the consultant and draw an arrow to that individual. Allow space for 3 to 5 generations. I think realistically for you guys, you're probably going to be maximum a 3-generation pedigree because that's what your time with a patient is going to allow. We're thankfully, usually we have a little bit more time than the general practitioner with a patient, and we have a bit more time to do a bigger pedigree. And then, of course, use standard pedigree symbols because this will go into their electronic chart to understand. Record the age of each individual. If you're doing really well, you're going to draw the siblings oldest to youngest, although that's not always how the patient gives them to you. It's not always how you have the room to do it, and so that's one of these things that we will not dock you for not doing in terms of the real world. And build a key. When you start shading people in, you need to draw in the upper corner what that shade in means. Does that mean that they have a heart defect? Does it mean they have a cleft palate? Does it mean that they have cancer? And so on. And just be careful with your abbreviations. Okay. So things that you ask about. The big things that people should be asking about when they take a pedigree, just kind of overall the broad terms, you want to know about mental retardation, you want to know about birth defects, you want to know about cancer at a young age, we're talking 30s and 40s, you want to know about sudden death either in adults or in kids, babies, and you want to know about consanguinity. And then these other things are things that we're concerned about, but those are the really big things that we ask about in genetics that are going to lead you to possibly additional things that you need to be worried about for your patient or proband. And when someone answers yes to one of those questions, you want them to continue to extrapolate upon that particular. So if they say, yes, this person has mental retardation, don't just write down mental retardation, because there's a whole spectrum of mental retardation, and different people have actually, honestly, different definitions for mental retardation. So did this kid have mental retardation? You then ask, did they go to regular school? Were they able to walk? Were they able to talk? If they're an adult, do they live independently? So try to get a better, do they look like other people in the family, or do they look different than other people in the family? And so on. So this is a very basic pedigree. You're actually looking at 1, 2, 3 generations, but we haven't expanded all the generations. So in this particular case, it was this little girl here who was a proband who brought the family to the attention. She was a 2-year-old with hypertonia and failure to thrive. And then we go on and we take the rest of her history. So you have her biological mother and father. She has a full brother who's 4 years old who also has speech delay. She has a maternal half-brother who's 10 years old and healthy. Mom also had a termination of a pregnancy, and this was with an entirely different partner, and so it doesn't come down with either in her father's union or in this union. And then we extend out. We see that mom has a sister, and that sister has 2 healthy children. We frequently use the notation of A and W in pedigrees to denote alive and well. So there's no medical issues that are known. And then if you go up, mom has the maternal grandmother had breast cancer at 72, and she's now 75 and healthy. The maternal grandfather passed away at 65 from a heart attack, myocardial infarction. The maternal grandmother also has other children through another union, but our patient didn't really know much about them, and that's why there's a question mark under them, and we just have a diamond because we don't know. She just knows my mom has other kids, and I don't know anything about them. And then over here we have Dad. Dad has a sister who has a child who's healthy. Dad's mother is deceased, and Dad didn't know what she passed away from or how old she was. And Dad's dad is healthy at 81 with type 2 diabetes. And then we indicate at the top there their ethnicity or ancestry. So mom is African American, and Dad is a combination of Dominican and Puerto Rican. What's missing from this pedigree is a little box then that should say, so I should have a little circle colored in that indicates that it's hypotonia and failure to thrive. And then additionally, I should indicate that I asked about mental retardation, birth defects, sudden death, cancer, consanguinity, and then often I also ask about myopathies, blindness, deafness. So pedigree practice. So if you have a piece of paper, it's going to make this section of the session or of the lecture a little bit more involved, and we'll do our best to draw a pedigree. I'm going to start some of it, but I'm not going to do all of it. Some of you guys can see it. So, a 45-year-old woman has come to you with cardiomyopathy diagnosed at 35. She has an ICD that is never fired. So I caution you that my pedigrees tend to be heavy on the cardiac issues just because that's what I work with. So cardiomyopathy is a disease of the heart, cardiomedian heart, and myopathy being muscle. There are different types of it. The most common genetic form of cardiomyopathy is something called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. So essentially, actually, all the walls of the heart become thicker and thicker, and it seems like it should be a good thing that you have extra muscle there, but in fact, it starts to cause obstruction. The muscle that's actually being created is in disarray and doesn't work as well. You can get arrhythmia problems because of it, and it's actually one of those things where people often during times of athleticism pass away, and so there's been professional athletes and college athletes who have died on the field because of cardiomyopathy. So this is a 45-year-old woman, and so she has cardiomyopathy herself, so I'm going to color her in. I'm going to put an arrow to her because she's who came to me, and she's also the proband. She was diagnosed at 35, and she's now 45. I'm going to go up and make my key, and I'm going to make sure that I know that this means cardiomyopathy. Can you not? Yeah. I have a picture of it at the end, because I know this is really far away for some of you guys. And I'm also not going to have room eventually. Proband and diagnosed 35, and now she's 45. So she has two daughters, ages 7 and 10, who both have normal echoes. So some people would say, let me draw on her dad, her husband, and let me draw on the girls. So because she's my proband, I don't care about his genetics in this particular case, so I can save room by not drawing in her husband, and I can just draw her kids going directly down. Okay. So again, make sure that your kids are linked by a horizontal line up here, and you're not linking your kids down here, and you're just drawing them down one single line from mom. It's not that you have multiple lines coming down from mom. So you have one single line coming down, and then you link them with a horizontal line at the top there. Okay. And so they're 7 and 10, and both have had normal echoes. So when this is the particular condition that they're coming in for, I'm going to note in my pedigree normal echoes, because this is the issue that they're coming in for. If mom came in because she had breast cancer, for these kids I don't need to know their normal echoes, but I'm concerned about their risk for cardiomyopathy, and so I want to know whether or not they've had screening for it. And so just the general theme is you will target your pedigree once there's something to target it to. Sometimes there's nothing to target it to, though. So our patient has 3 brothers and a sister, all have the same mother and father. So that makes it easy, because I can just draw in her mom and dad and get the rest of her siblings in. So I'm going to go in. Here's mom and dad. I forgot to mention this, but when you're drawing parents, the female goes on the right-hand side of the paper, and the male goes on the left-hand side of the paper. And she has 3 brothers and 1 sister. So if I knew the ages, I would draw her oldest siblings over here and go down until I got to the youngest sibling. I don't know the ages, and to be honest with you, I don't spend a lot of time making sure that those ages go in the right order. But if you're given it and it's all laid out and you're not sitting in there trying to actively take the pedigree, go for it. Put them in the ages of descending. But I don't. And because all of these people are important to me, I'm not going to shorthand anybody. So if I were talking about our cousins, I might be able to go three brothers there. But because they're still first-degree relatives for her, I need to write out each one of her brothers. And again, just so they get a horizontal line at the top of them links them all as siblings. Okay. And now I'm going to start running out of room, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time about the rest of it. But you start to get the idea. Okay. So our patient has 3 brothers and 1 sister, all have the same mom and dad. 1 brother is 49 and has HCM. So because he has HCM, or hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, sorry, I started using different, I can color him in and put his age below him. He's 49 years old. And has an ICD, an implantable cardiac defibrillator. So he has 2 daughters, so I draw his daughters below him. Their ages below their symbols and indicate they have normal echoes. 1 brother passed away at 30 in an accident. To indicate someone has died, you put a line through them. So that indicates death. And then we generally put a little D and then what they died from. And we also try to put age if we know it. So accident and 30. And then he has a 13-year-old son who has never had an echo. 1 brother is 42 and has never had an echo, and he has no children. So remember, we indicate, so 1 brother is 40, so this guy has, so we put the 2 daughters here. The son. This guy is 32, no echo. And no children, just when we don't know why someone doesn't have children, we just put a line right there. If we know that they're infertile, we put a double line, and sometimes I try to put why they're infertile, azoospermia or something like that, or polycystic ovary disease in his wife. If we don't know why they're infertile, you just keep it a double line. If you have no knowledge that they're infertile or anything like that, just keep it a single line. If you know they don't have children because they just haven't had children yet, we usually put a little C there to indicate choice. Her mother is 71 and has diabetes, so you can go ahead and write her age below the symbol and add just diabetes. Her father passed away at 42 in his sleep, and he had no autopsy. So again, I'm concerned about this being related to the cardiomyopathy in the family. This is the disease that she came to me for evaluation of, and so I'm asking more details. And really, anytime someone passes away in their sleep, you want to know, do you know why they died in their sleep? And in this case, they don't know. He had no autopsy.
That would be true for the brother who died in an accident too, maybe he was driving down the road and
Yep,
had
so
no arrhythmia.
you point out very good. So we often ask in accidents whether or not there were 2 cars involved or 1 car involved. And with the idea that when it's 1 car involved, you're more likely that it was some type of arrhythmia that drew you off the road and caused you to crash into a car. Whereas, I mean, there can be 2 cars involved as well when you're having an arrhythmia or you faint or you lose consciousness while you're driving. But it just makes it a little bit more suspect when there's 1 car involved. And people usually know the answer to that question. So she has 1 maternal aunt. This aunt has 2 sons, and our patient does not know about their health or their children's health. So again, this is just going to be like drawing another set of siblings up by her mother. So a maternal aunt is her mom's sister. So you're going to draw her out. And if your page is big enough, you're going to draw her sister out so far that you then have room below to draw on her children. That's the best case scenario on your pedigree. So you want to draw, and what I want to do is I want to try and keep the same generations in the same level. So you can't see this here, but I've drawn, so she's the same generation as her sister, and then when I draw the children of her sister, they fall in the same generation as this proband's generation because they're the same generation. And then when I draw on their children, they fall in the same generation as our proband's children. So you want to be able to kind of quickly look at this and understand kind of how people are related. She has 1 paternal uncle, so that's her dad's brother. And same thing, you draw them far enough out so you have room to draw them in the same line as where it's appropriate. She does not know about his health or his children's health. So in this case, I'm sorry, I have to erase my key here. But what you can do is, so we've got his brother, and then she says, I don't know, he's got some kids, I don't know what's going on with him. That's where you can start using your diamonds, put a little N in there, he's got some kids, and then write a question mark below. So I know he has kids, but I don't know what's going on in them, and at some point if it becomes important, we can investigate further there. But we're getting to pretty distantly related, and so at this point we don't know of anything about them that's pertinent to the pedigree. She had another paternal uncle who died in his 40s. She does not know the details of his death. This uncle might have had a child who also passed away. So again, I don't have room for it, but let's make this uncle now this person with a child who might have passed away. In this case, then, again, I don't know the sex of this child who passed away, so I'm going to put a line through them, a question mark next to the death. I don't know why they died. A line through the uncle who's deceased. He's going to die. Hey, I'm going to put a little D to indicate 40, and another question mark because we don't know why he died, right? Yeah. This person isn't very informative. Okay. In this case, I'm going to go further, and I'm going to ask about her grandparents. Okay. So her maternal grandmother, her mom's mother, passed away in her 80s of old age. And again, it's just going to be one more level above these individuals. So you're going to go up here and get the grandparents on this level. Her grandfather died in his 70s of a heart attack. Her paternal grandparents both died young. We don't really, she never knew them. She doesn't know what they died of. They were never discussed in the family. And this isn't unusual to run across things like that. And then I ask about her ancestry. So her paternal family is German. Her maternal family is English and Irish. And then I proceed to ask about birth defects, mental retardation, young age of cancer, sudden death, and consanguinity, muscle blindness, deafness. So here we go. Any questions about this final pedigree? And congratulations to all of you who are drawing along. You've just drawn your first pedigree, and if it doesn't look like this, that's completely understandable because I knew what was going on when I drew this pedigree.
Be careful when you do abbreviations. I work in cardiac surgery and cardiology, so when I see MR, I think mitral regurg. I had a patient I had a student with me, and she kept looking at all of our charts and said, "This is horrible. These people have severe mental retardation." And I'm like, "No, it's mitral regurg." So just be familiar with that. Just think about other people may look at your pedigree, especially if you put it in the record. So if you write MR, write the legend in it means mental retardation versus mitral regurg.
So you can see how frequently we use MR to mean mental retardation because in our typed up key, we still have it abbreviated. And BD means birth defects. You had a question? Sorry.
I do. For things like cardiomyopathy or I know there's several family members getting ICDs and things like that as a result. Would that be one of the things that you would make a key for, or is that not relevant to what you're looking for?
So, I mean, you could, but it's really not one of these. So we think of using those different types of keys to really indicate people who have different features of the same condition. So an ICD is not really a feature of it, but it's rather the treatment that they're receiving. So I don't typically use that. I do often indicate on the pedigree whether or not they have an ICD. And one of the reasons why that is, and you'll find this also in other conditions where knowing what type of treatment that individual has helps you to confirm their diagnosis. And so there are a lot of things where people, I mean, understandably, there are many different heart problems that happen out there. And so someone might confuse the fact that atherosclerosis or coronary artery disease is related to hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, but you're much less likely to end up with an ICD if that's what your particular heart problem is. Or conversely, within the cancer scenario, so there's things like ductal carcinoma, DCIS, or ductal carcinoma in situ, which, I mean, it's a very different type of cancer, and some would even argue, kind of because of how it's treated and because of the risk of it becoming malignant, is really something different than, breast cancer that required a mastectomy and chemotherapy and radiation. And so knowing the treatment that someone receives helps you to clearly define their diagnosis. And so I do indicate what type of treatment people have received, but I don't typically put it into the kind of the individual symbol type of thing. More of a situation is conditions where multiple different types of cancers occur, or conditions in which multiple different types of features occur. So there's certain types of mitochondrial conditions where within a family you might have one person who has diabetes and deafness because of it, and you might have another person who has muscle weakness and deafness because of it. And in that case, then I would start putting in my different quadrants colored in. Any other questions? We're going to do one more pedigree, or we can, do you guys want to do one more pedigree, or do you want to do pedigree analysis? It's up to you guys. Yep.
I have a question. If there's one that you said that they might have died from something, if someone gives you a history saying they might have had whatever genetic disease you're talking about, do you put it as marked as unknown, or as if they had the disease, if they're like
So, for example, if this particular case, I think my mom said that she has a big heart, and I'm not sure if that's cardiomyopathy. I wouldn't definitively color someone in, but I'd certainly make that notation in my pedigree. So, for example, the uncle here who died in his 40s, I think he might have had a big heart, and it might have been cardiomyopathy. I'm not going to color him in definitively because they're not secure in that that's what he passed away from, but I'm certainly going to make a note more than just a question mark below the symbol. I'm going to say enlarged heart, and oftentimes we use quotation marks to indicate when it's a patient report and that they're somewhat uncertain of it. I'm a little bit more confident in her brother's diagnosis of cardiomyopathy because she herself has a diagnosis of cardiomyopathy. She understands that diagnosis, and then she understands her brother's. Obviously, until I have records, I'm not certain of it. So we're going to go through this one a little bit more quickly. I think you guys all have a copy of the slides and the final pedigree, so you can test yourself out on it a little bit later on. So this is a 68-year-old with DCIS, diagnosed 1 year ago, so I'm going to color her in. I'm going to put, and in this case, I think I do start using, you could consider using coloring in quadrants for this. So indicate like an upper right-hand corner is DCIS, because we're going to start asking about other types of cancer in this family. She's coming to us because of concern for hereditary breast and ovarian cancer, so I'm going to want to know about all different types of cancers people had in that. We know that there's both breast and ovarian cancer, but we also know that there's a higher risk for prostate cancer, and then there's a slightly higher risk for pancreatic cancer, and there's questionable association with colon cancer, although most people don't think it's related. So she has 2 daughters and 1 son. We all remember how to do that. One daughter had cervical cancer at age 23 and is now well and alive at 32. You'll see this a lot because it is a gynecological cancer. People will be concerned that it's related to breast and ovarian cancer within the family, but we all know that cervical cancer at a young age is most commonly caused by HPV and is not related to breast and ovarian cancer. So she has no children. Another daughter is 38 with a history of hyperthyroidism controlled with medication. Then we go over all of her children. And in this case, ASD here stands for atrial septal defect, not autism spectrum disorder, but it will be important to indicate that on your pedigree. And the son has high blood pressure, and his children, and one of them required speech therapy. And then our patient has 2 sisters and 2 brothers. So we go into her sisters, we go into her sister's children, we go into her brothers, we go into his brother's children, and I think this next one, we go into her parents and her aunts and uncles, we go into her grandparents because we're doing the full pedigree, and here's the final pedigree. So in this case, I did use the symbols. We're talking about, the cancer conditions, and so I have an upper quadrant for breast cancer, I have a lower quadrant for cervical cancer, and another quadrant for lung cancer. My key is wrong up there. The breast cancer should be on the other side there. My key is wrong. With all of them where I color in breast cancer, I then indicate the type of breast cancer that they had. So it was DCIS. So do you guys think that this woman is at high risk for hereditary breast and ovarian cancer? No. So she has some cancers in her family. All of them, though, appear to be postmenopausal breast cancer, which is much less likely to be associated with hereditary breast and ovarian cancer syndrome. And the lung cancer also is at an older age. The only young cancer is a cervical cancer, but that can probably be explained by HPV. So I have a pedigree. What do I do now? So I'm going to go over into some Mendelian patterns of inheritance. So you probably learned this in biology a couple times over the years, but we'll go into it more looking at a pedigree and trying to understand the inheritance pattern that's occurring. So before we do that, we're just going to do a quick little rundown of genes so we understand where we're coming from here. So trillions of cells inside nearly every single cell, at least all the cells that have a nucleus. We have a complete set of our genetic information. They're packaged into these structures called chromosomes. And the chromosomes hold are approximately 20,000 genes in each cell. We know what the function of some of the genes, and we know mutations in some of the genes cause disease. So that's what we're looking at there. That's why you take a blood sample and you can learn about your genetic information, about your heart, about your cancer, about your birth defect, just from a blood sample, because all of our cells contain a complete set of our genetic information. So Mendelian or monogenic patterns of inheritance. Monogenic simply means that there's one gene, that gene with the mutation in it is causing the disease in the family. So it's an individual who, rather than having multiple genes with multiple mutations that's causing their disease, they have one gene with 1 or 2 mutations that is causing the disease. So monogenic patterns of inheritance. Many genetic conditions out there are not monogenic inheritance. And so, in fact, the majority of genetic conditions that occur within the population are not monogenic. So all the other things are multifactorial, meaning that there are little genetic components that play a role, but there are a lot of other things that we don't know about. There's environmental impacts and diet and exercise that all play a role. So things like heart disease, diabetes, high cholesterol, all of those are multifactorial inheritance. Well, we'll start off with the nice easy ones of monogenic patterns of inheritance. So there's autosomal dominant. Autosomal simply means that it occurs on the chromosomes that are the same in both men and women. So both men and women can be affected. And dominant indicates that in your 2 copies of the gene, you just have to have a mutation in one. So I think next week I'll go over, it doesn't really help you that next week I'm going over this more detail, but a little refresher, something you have probably all learned, that we get half of our genetic information from mom in the egg, we get half of our genetic information from dad in the sperm, and for most genes we get 1 copy of each gene from mom and we get the other copy of each gene from dad. For autosomal dominant inheritance, you have 2 copies of the gene. Having mutation or mistake in 1 copy is enough to make you have the disease or predisposed to the disease. Common examples of autosomal dominant inheritance are many of the cancer conditions, so breast and ovarian cancer, the colon cancer conditions, but also a lot of things like neurofibromatosis, which is that condition I was talking about with different types of skin lesions as well as some learning disabilities. Marfan syndrome, which you guys have probably all heard about, that's the one that makes you tall with long arms and legs, and it also causes an aortic dissection. That's an autosomal dominant inheritance, meaning that oftentimes one parent has it, there's a 50% chance for the children to inherit it. Also, autosomal dominant inheritance can also be something that happens new within the family. So achondroplasia is an autosomal dominant condition, but for the majority of individuals who have achondroplasia, both of their parents are of normal stature. So achondroplasia is the most common type of dwarfism. And there are definitely parents who have achondroplasia, and then they have a child with achondroplasia, but parents with achondroplasia can also have a child of average stature who doesn't have achondroplasia, and then for the majority of kids with achondroplasia, their parents are both of average stature and it was a new mutation in them. Autosomal recessive. In autosomal recessive, you have 2 copies of the gene, and both copies have to have a mutation in order to be affected. So having 1 copy that works and 1 copy with mutation makes you perfectly fine. It's only after you have 2 copies with the mutation. Common examples of autosomal recessive conditions are cystic fibrosis. So every woman who's pregnant in the United States gets offered screening to see whether or not they're a carrier of cystic fibrosis. If the mother is a carrier of cystic fibrosis, and only if the father is also a carrier of cystic fibrosis, is there a chance then for the child to be affected. There are actually, there are labs now that will test for over 100 different conditions of autosomal recessive inheritance to see whether or not parents are carriers to determine the risk for the children. Other examples of autosomal recessive that people historically know about are Tay-Sachs. So this is a condition that's more common within the Jewish population, and they've actually taken a lot of strides to prevent children from Tay-Sachs, from children being affected with Tay-Sachs by doing a lot of screening before someone becomes pregnant to understand their risk. Sex-linked. Sex-linked means that they have the risk of a male versus a female being affected is different. And that has to do with our last 2 chromosomes. Women have 2 X's and males have an X and a Y, and depending on whether the gene is present on the X chromosome or the Y chromosome. And then finally, there's mitochondrial. So mitochondrial inheritance is actually the genetic information that's not present in the nuclear genome, but is just present in the mitochondria of the cell. So remember that we have the majority of our genes are included in our nuclear genome, which is our 20,000 genes. And then our mitochondria, which are just our little engines for our cells and create our energy, also have their unique genome. It's that circular genome. It looks like bacterial genome, and that actually encodes for some of the components of the mitochondria, but not all of them. And we get all of our mitochondrial DNA from the mom. Okay. So this just goes over again a little bit more about autosomal dominant. Autosomal dominant means, this is an analogy some people like to use. It's like your 2 copies of the gene are your 2 bike wheels. You take one away and your bike doesn't work at all anymore because having 1 mutation is enough to cause you to have disease. Whereas autosomal recessive, it's like a 2-slot toaster. If one of the slots of your toaster isn't working, you can still make toast. And that's because if you have a mutation in only 1 copy of your gene, you're still okay. So this is looking at inheritance in autosomal recessive, and this is exactly what I was talking about in terms of like cystic fibrosis or Tay-Sachs, where both mom and dad can be carriers of a mutation, and they themselves are perfectly healthy. There's no manifestation of the disease. When they have children, there's 4 different combinations that they can make, depending on which copy of the gene they pass on to their children. They both can pass on the unaffected copy, in which case they have an unaffected non-carrier child. They can pass on, mom can pass on, actually this in this case, dad's passing on the mutation, and mom passes on her copy without the mutation, and you have an unaffected carrier of the condition, so that an individual is a carrier but doesn't have disease. Mom can pass on her copy of the mutation, and dad passes on his gene without the mutation. You have an unaffected carrier again. And then the last combination is they both pass on their copy of the gene with the mutation, and you have an affected child because that child has no working copies of the gene. And if you count this out, there's a 1 in 4 chance for the child to be affected, or 25%. There's a 2 in 4, or 50% chance for the child to be an unaffected carrier. And there's a 1 in 4, or 25% chance for the child to be unaffected, not a carrier. So this is where you will hear this over and over. In an autosomal recessive condition, if both parents are carriers, there's a 25% chance for the child to be affected. That also means there's a 75% chance for the child not to be affected. Okay. So autosomal recessive conditions. So I already talked about Tay-Sachs and cystic fibrosis. Another common autosomal recessive condition is sickle cell disease. This is more common in individuals of African American and Hispanic ancestry. Hemochromatosis is actually one of the most common genetic conditions, also autosomal recessive, but the symptoms of it only manifest in about 10% of individuals who have the disease. It's caused by iron overload. It's more common that males have symptoms than females, so it actually has sex-related penetrance, and this is because females are less susceptible to iron overload because of their menstrual cycle, so you're releasing excess iron, whereas men have a higher propensity to have an iron overload. And actually the treatment for hemochromatosis is just regularly donating blood. PKU or phenylketonuria, this is a condition that you will, if you look at your can of Coke, it will say that it contains phenylketonuria, or I'm blanking on the actual enzyme that I'm worried about, or the amino acid. But this is a metabolic condition that is actually screened for on all newborn screens, and with a carefully controlled diet where you're not actually consuming this particular amino acid, there's fairly good treatment for it. And then thalassemias are another one that's not a condition that's autosomal recessive that you will run into. So going on to autosomal dominant. In this particular case, I have a dad who's affected with the disease and a mom who's unaffected and does not have the mutation. When he has children, he has a 50-50 chance of passing on that particular genetic mutation and having a child who's affected, and a 50% chance to not pass on that genetic mutation. Okay. Some common autosomal dominant conditions that you might have run across. I think I've discussed almost all of them. Familial hypercholesterolemia is not your normal high cholesterol that can occur within the family. Familial hypercholesterolemia is cholesterol in the 400s, and these individuals actually develop cholesterol deposits on their skin called xanthomas that you can get usually around the ankles and such. So it's one strong gene that's causing them they're actually not processing their cholesterol properly. So it's not just the individuals that have cholesterol in the 200s that's occurring within the family. Most forms of Alzheimer's disease are not this autosomal dominant form. Most people who have Alzheimer's, it's not related to this, but individuals who have Alzheimer's in their 40s, 50s, 60s, when onset is at that age, it might be due to familial early onset Alzheimer's. So X-linked recessive. So remember, in recessive conditions, you need to have 2 mutations or no working copy of the gene in order to be affected. When you start to get to your chromosomes on X and Y, it becomes a little different about how males and females are affected because of the number of X chromosomes males versus females have. So females have 2 X chromosomes, and therefore they have 2 copies of the genes on the X chromosome, whereas men have an X and a Y, and therefore they have primarily just one copy of the genes that are on the X chromosome. There are a couple genes that are on the X chromosome are also on the Y chromosome. But for our purposes in terms of understanding inheritance patterns, men have only one copy of the genes on the X chromosome. So for an X-linked recessive condition, a mother who has a mutation in the gene on the X chromosome is not affected because she has that second working copy of the X. But when she has children, she has a chance to have affected sons because the sons always get the X chromosome from mom and get their Y chromosome from dad. It has to happen that way because the only person they get their Y chromosome is from dad, and so they have to get their other chromosome from mom. And so when she has children, she has a 50-50 chance of passing on the affected X chromosome to her children. When her sons receive it, her sons are affected with the disease. When her daughters receive it, they are unaffected carriers of the disease. She can also pass on the X chromosome without the mutation, in which case her sons are unaffected and her daughters are unaffected, not a carrier. Yep.
So it just means 50% chance of her son being affected?
Exactly, yep. So if you look at it, how many ways does she make a son? These 2 ways. How many ways of those 2 is the son affected? 1 out of 2 ways. So she has a 50% of having an unaffected son. If you don't know the gender of her pregnancy, she has a 25% chance of having an affected child. And that is because you count up all the different ways she can make a child. There's 4 different ways. 1 of them makes an affected child. So if you're saying just overall her chance of having an affected child is 1 in 4 or 25%. Her chances of having an affected son is 1 in 2 or 50%. Her chances of having an affected daughter is 0 out of 2. Neither one of those scenarios is her daughter affected. So X-linked recessive disorders include Duchenne muscular dystrophy. So this is a severe muscular dystrophy that occurs in boys. And what's showing there is this is the Gower sign. So this is where kids can no longer get off the floor without using their hands and then bracing themselves on their knees because they're having truncal myopathy. And these are kids, unfortunately, they're in wheelchairs usually by 5 or 6 and pretty seriously involved by 10 or 11, and unfortunately they pass away from kind of systemic muscular weakness, so their diaphragm no longer moves appropriately, they're no longer able to swallow appropriately, their heart is affected, and they pass away from that. Color blindness is X-linked, so that's always when mom comes in, my son's colorblind, and you ask, do you have any brothers, or is your dad colorblind? They're like, yeah, and that's why it makes sense. Thankfully, most of the time, that's not something that causes any major medical problems. Hemophilia is also one of the common X-linked conditions, and I think this is showing the British royalty, which there was a long line of hemophilia in the British royalty there. And then glucose-6-phosphate dehydrogenase deficiency, and this is just that you don't process certain foods appropriately, and this is showing a kid with jaundice from his G6PD deficiency. X-linked dominant. So it's exactly what it sounds like. You have the X chromosome, and now you have a mutation where just having one mutation is enough to cause you to have the disease. So in this case, you have a mother with an X-linked dominant condition, and she's affected with it because having one mutation is enough to cause the disease. It's the bicycle analogy. You knock off one wheel, your bike doesn't work anymore. In this case, when she has children, both sons and daughters can be affected, and she has a 50% chance with each son of the son being affected, and she has a 50% chance of each daughter being affected. In many types of X-linked dominant conditions, they are actually male lethal, and so you actually see women having recurrent miscarriages, which if you have any ability to do any type of chromosome analysis on them, you would find that there's a higher occurrence of male fetuses being miscarried, because with a lot of autosomal X-linked dominant conditions, males can't live with it, and so they're not born with it. Also, with X-linked dominant, if males do live with it, you can see some difference in the severity in males versus females. So some examples of that are Rett syndrome. So it's still under debate, but for the vast majority of individuals of the community, it seems that Rett syndrome is lethal in males, and females are affected with it. And for many of those cases, you might ask, well, if it's lethal in males and females are actually fairly significantly cognitively impaired with Rett syndrome, the majority of this is X-linked dominant, so females are having mutations that are occurring on their X chromosome and just one copy is enough to cause disease, but the majority of them are de novo mutations, so they're not inheriting it from a very cognitively impaired mother, but rather mom and dad are healthy and a new mutation is occurring in the daughter. Fragile X is also, so this is a condition that can affect both males and females, but it's typically more severe in males. X-linked hypophosphatasia rickets, again, this is a condition that can affect both males and females, but males have a more severe form of rickets. And then incontinentia pigmenta, which is primarily a skin problem that starts off as bullous eruptions on the skin, and then it actually, it fades to these lines of Bashko, so it looks like they actually follow nerve lines underneath. And again, this is a condition that's believed to be lethal in males, but for girls who have it, they actually do pretty well after they go through their scary period, prenatal or during the neonatal period. So we've gone over inheritance patterns, and now we can look at pedigrees and try to guess some of the inheritance patterns for the last little bit of this class. So in this particular pedigree, how do we do inheritance patterns or pedigree analysis with this? So what I'm looking for are key factors of different types of inheritance patterns. So for this particular case, we've talked about autosomal dominant, autosomal recessive, X-linked recessive, X-linked dominant, and what does this particular pedigree fit? So the first case, I'm just going to look at it and assess what do I see. So I see individuals affected in every generation. So I know, so in 3 generations there are individuals affected. I see both males and females affected. So remember what I said about X-linked conditions. You see a different, the proportion of males versus females affected is different. So I'm going to cross off an X-linked condition for this family. And then secondly, for a recessive condition, you don't typically see people affected in every generation. For this to be a recessive condition, I would have to make grandma up here a carrier, and then I would have to introduce the mom right here to be a carrier in order to have all these affected individuals. So the best answer to this is actually autosomal dominant. So I have an affected male having both affected and unaffected children in both males and females, and then I have another affected male who's having both affected and unaffected children in both males and females. So the answer to this is autosomal dominant. I think I put that in there. Okay, so I went over that again. So I talked about the kind of the top of those things. Things in autosomal dominant that can trip you up a little bit is variable expression or incomplete penetrance or age effect. So there are different conditions in the autosomal dominant family where someone might not look to be affected just by the disease that they have. So the most common example of this is with the cancer syndromes. You are born with that genetic mutation when you're age 0 and you have it, but you may not have any symptoms of that particular mutation until you're in your 30s or 40s when you develop cancer. And so through pedigree analysis, if you don't have their genotype, which you frequently don't, the pedigree is going to look weird. It's going to look top heavy, in that there are going to be a lot of people affected in your older generations, and there are not going to be as many people affected in your younger generations as you would expect. This is because they haven't reached the age of disease yet. There are also other conditions with something called incomplete penetrance. Incomplete penetrance refers to the phenomenon in which an individual can have the genetic mutation and they're at risk to develop the disease, but for whatever reason they don't develop the disease. So remember, with breast and ovarian cancer, you have an 85% chance to develop breast cancer in your lifetime. That also means that you have a 15% chance not to develop it. And there are people with this that are gene positive who never go on to develop cancer. There are other conditions where the reduced penetrance is even higher. So there's something called familial pulmonary hypertension, and only 20% of the individuals who have this autosomal dominant condition actually develop the disease. So looking at a pedigree of that particular type of inheritance doesn't look like your clear-cut autosomal dominant pedigree, but it actually is. So there are, we're not going to try and trick you too much, but just keep in mind when your pedigree doesn't completely fit what you think it should, there are answers as to why that might be. Okay, so in these two cases, what is the inheritance? So these are just two different pedigrees that are on the same slide. Families are not related in any way, but what I'm looking at here is I'm looking at so let's start with pedigree A. There are 3 generations, and people are affected only in 1 generation. Both males and females are affected, and parents are having both affected and unaffected children. What seems like the inheritance pattern there? Recessive, exactly. We're not trying to trick you up here at all. This is what makes sense for it, is that there are probably other people in the family who are carriers. I don't have them colored in because I don't know their genotype, but they just didn't marry someone who was also a carrier, so all of their children are unaffected. This next case is showing consanguinity. So these individuals here are cousins. They're first cousins. And this is a telltale, so consanguineous couples have a higher chance of having children who are affected with an autosomal recessive condition because they share common ancestral genes. So, for example, in this case, grandma could be a carrier of something, and she passes that down onto her 2 daughters. Her 2 daughters are both carriers of something that never causes them any disease, but then they each pass that down to these 2 children who are also both carriers. But because they marry and have children then, because they're both carriers of the same disease, which they ultimately inherited from a common ancestor, their grandmother up here, they then have a 1 in 4 chance of having a child affected with that condition. So that's why we talk about an increased risk for birth defects and problems in children of consanguineous unions. It's actually, in first cousins, the risk of having a baby with a birth defect is increased above the general population, but it's not that increased. It's about double, 5 to 6%. So we have about a 2 to 3% chance if we marry someone who is not related to us in any way of having a child with a birth defect, whereas first cousins have about a 5 to 6% chance, which oftentimes people are surprised that it's that low. So again, I kind of went over this on that previous slide. So no sex difference in the clinical manifestations. Horizontal transmission, meaning it's just present in 1 generation very often. Consanguinity should be a little clue for you to think about autosomal recessive, although not every child of a union of consanguinity with a birth defect has an autosomal recessive condition, and it's very rare to see a new mutation, meaning that someone just popped up with a mutation, unlike autosomal dominant, where there are many conditions that are known for the frequency of high new mutations. So we have a couple more minutes left. So this here, now we're looking at this pedigree, and what do we see? So the first thing that jumps out, exactly, I think I heard someone say it, that only men are affected in this pedigree. That's the first thing that jumps out to me. And so I'm thinking of some type of excellent condition because there are only males affected. Remember, so now we have to figure out, is it X-linked dominant or is it X-linked recessive? So with X-linked recessive, women are not affected because they have 2 copies of the X chromosome, they have 1 copy with a mutation in it, and they have 1 copy without. So typically women are not affected in an X-linked recessive condition, and when they have children, the girls are not affected, but the boys have a 50% chance to be affected. With X-linked dominant, women are affected. If they're having children, they're affected with it. And males who are affected with it, all of their daughters are affected with it. So we didn't go over that phenomenon, but think about it. So if a male is affected with an X-linked dominant condition, I just said all of their daughters have to be affected with it. And why is that? So if a male has an X-linked dominant condition, they have their Y chromosome, which is fine, and they have their X chromosome, which has a mutation in it. So here's my dad. Here's his X and his Y, and his X has a mutation in it. When a mom and dad have children, and they have specifically female children, mom passes on 1 copy of her X chromosome to the girl, and dad has to pass on his 1 and only copy of the X chromosome to his daughter. And therefore, when a man is affected with an X-linked dominant condition, all of his daughters are affected. This is X-linked dominant, so that means that the daughter having 1 copy with the mutation in it is enough for her to have disease. That other X chromosome doesn't protect her. So in this particular case, I have men affected with the disease, and I have them having unaffected daughters. Additionally, I have women who are unaffected with the disease, and they are having affected sons. So think about that again. if you are talking about an X-linked dominant condition and there are affected sons, remember sons get their one and only X chromosome from mom, and so mom has to be affected with that X-linked dominant condition if the sons are affected. Because they have to get the X with the mutation in it, and then the Y from dad. So this is in fact X-linked recessive inheritance. This mom right here is a carrier, and she passed it on to her son. She also passed down the X without the mutation onto her other son, and we don't know what type of X that this daughter got. This dad right here passed on his X with the mutation onto this daughter. She's a carrier, but she's unaffected, and then when she had a son, she passed on the X with the mutation. This is a very classic pedigree for hemophilia. So this is so only males, every generation, no male-to-male transmission, and unaffected parents have affected sons or unaffected females. So I think we went over all of it. So one of the things I haven't talked about and why X-linked recessive is the way it is at some point you may have learned, and we'll talk about this I think more next week, of a phenomenon called lionization or X inactivation. So this refers to the phenomenon that happens in women's cells. So because ultimately, biologically, we really just need, for the majority of the genes that are on our X chromosome, we really just need one copy turned on. So in women, what happens is it's random in each cell, but one copy of your X chromosome is turned off, and the other copy is the X chromosomes that ultimately most of the genes are read for. This is the majority of the genes, but it's not every gene. And for women who don't have a mutation on either one of their copies of the X chromosome, this is random. Either your maternal copy of the X chromosome is turned off, or your paternal, and it's random in each cell. For women who are carriers of an X-linked condition, it's not random. It's skewed X inactivation, meaning that we preferentially turn off the copy of the X chromosome with the mutation, and we keep the copy of the X chromosome without the mutation on it. And so you have skewed X inactivation. All of your cells turn on the X chromosome without the mutation and turn off the X chromosome with the mutation. But if you, for some reason, can't turn off that copy with the X mutation, or the copy of the gene or the chromosome with the mutation on it, and you have to use it, and there are reasons why this can happen, you can end up with a female who's affected with an X-linked recessive condition. I don't think they're going to throw you for a loop in that way, but there are rare circumstances in which you can end up with a female with an who's affected with an X-linked recessive condition. We went over this. All daughters of affected males are carriers. All sons of affected males are unaffected, and there's no male-to-male transmission. Okay. So what type of inheritance pattern are we looking at here? So it's X-linked dominant, partially because we just haven't gotten to that one, but it also fits it very nicely. So in this case here, you have an affected male, and remember what we said, for affected males with X-linked dominant, all of their daughters are affected. And then for women who are affected with an X-linked dominant condition, it's a 50-50 chance for their children. So it fits very nicely with an X-linked dominant. And again, it just goes over those that we talked about. And then for end all of kind of the inheritance patterns that we've covered, this is our final one. So I didn't cover this very well, so I'm just going to kind of jump into it. But first of all, we're looking at this. There are people affected in every generation. There are both males and females affected, but it appears as though affected males are not having affected children. And when I look at my women, when they're having children, all of their children are affected. And so this is actually showing an example of a mitochondrial inheritance, meaning that moms have a mutation in their mitochondria genome. Because children get all their mitochondria genome from their mother, when they pass it on, they're all affected to some degree. There's a lot of variable expressivity because of different effects called a bottleneck effect. So it has to do with how many mitochondria you receive from your mother and how many of those mitochondria have the mutation in their genome, whereas a certain population of them usually also don't have the mutation in the genome. And so you can see with different conditions, it can be so severe as you have seizures, coma, death as a child, or it might be more mildly affected where you're having early onset type 2 diabetes and deafness. But in mitochondrial inheritance, all children of women who are affected are affected. Mitochondrial conditions affect organs of high energy involvement, so the CNS, eye, muscle tissue, your pancreas, these are all areas that require, your ear require a lot of energy, and so that's where you're having symptoms of the condition. And then just to throw you for a loop, and you're not really going to see this in this lecture, your mitochondria are the genes that encode for the proteins that make up your mitochondria are encoded both by the mitochondrial genome as well as there are some genes in your nuclear genome that make some of the complexes in your mitochondria. And so you can have a mitochondrial condition that's inherited in an autosomal recessive fashion because it's caused by mutations in your nuclear genes that encode for the components of your mitochondria. So there's two different things. You can talk about mitochondrial inheritance, which is that maternal inheritance where you see affected moms having all affected children. And then you can talk about a mitochondrial condition, and mitochondrial conditions don't necessarily have mitochondrial inheritance. That's no fun, I know. We'll say it again. So your mitochondria are composed of these complexes, in which is your electron transport chain that generates energy, ultimately is generating energy. Each one of those complexes has components that are encoded by the genes in your mitochondria genome, which is that little circular genome that's present in each one of your mitochondria. And it's also encoded by genes that are present in your nuclear genes. So those are the genes that are in your nucleus. Those are the vast majority of your genes, your 20,000 genes. And so you can have mitochondrial conditions that are caused by a mutation in your mitochondrial genome, in which case those are inherited in a mitochondrial fashion or a maternal fashion. Your mother's affected. All children of affected moms are affected. Males who are affected have unaffected children because they don't pass on their mitochondrial genome. You can, though, have a mitochondrial disease caused by a mutation in your nuclear genes. When you have mutations in your nuclear genes, these are not passed on, even though they encode for your mitochondria, they're passed on in your genes that are separate from your mitochondria. They're passed on in your nucleus. And so in that case, you can have autosomal recessive, it's typically autosomal recessive inheritance of a condition that is affecting your mitochondria.
And is it X-linked? It has to be X-linked then, correct? Because wouldn't that code the mitochondria position?
So in this case, it's completely separate. So it's not X-linked. You can have some X-linked. So X-linked conditions have to do with being on your X or your Y chromosome. Your mitochondrial genome is completely separate from your chromosome. So it's not on any one of your chromosomes. It's not on your X and your Y. It's a little circle of DNA that's unique and present in each one of your mitochondria. So each cell, depending on how much energy it has to use and generate, has several mitochondria to hundreds to thousands of mitochondria. And each one of those mitochondria has its own little circle of DNA. And many of them are one progenitor is kind of mitochondrial, so they all get that, but you get a set number of mitochondria from your mother, and then the rest of your mitochondria generated from the mitochondria you receive from your mom. And it's completely separate from the genes you're receiving from your mom and your dad in the nucleus. I think you get a whole nother lecture with that type of stuff, though. Y-linked, we don't want to forget it. So there are some genes of importance on the Y chromosome, and there are conditions that can be affected. So hairy ears. With Y-linked conditions, obviously females are not affected. Only males are affected. And if a dad has it, all of his sons are going to be affected. There's just one Y chromosome to pass on. There's no second copy or anything like that to prevent you from having the disease. And so there are a variety of conditions that we think of being polymorphic or Y-linked is what it is. Okay. So important points in looking at your pedigree, and there's a gajillion pedigrees after all of this that you can go over. There's also tricks of inheritance, and I'll cover more of this in next week's lecture. And then if you go to the end of this lecture, you can test out all your knowledge of inheritance patterns. But we'll cover that. So this is a whole bunch of slides on different types of inheritance patterns. But I'll let you guys go. Thanks for staying tonight and staying awake. And I'll see you next week.
I actually have a credit athlete, and I was wondering what classifies one as being like diagnosed with disease. I don't know if you are some dumb, it's an autism. It gets passed on to but then the expression of the disease doesn't necessarily need, like you could be gene positive, but phenotype negative.
And you can be that, you can go your entire life, or you might invest in that disease. So we say exactly that. You have a genetic predisposition to develop a disease. For somebody that's gene positive, that's 20% of it, I wouldn't color in their symbol. I would actually just draw their symbol and draw a line. That means that you know they're genetically susceptible to the disease, but they have not yet developed it.
And they're still like doing all the testing to see like that's still up. That's the new field, right? It's what makes certain people express.
Exactly. So what who is gene positive and why are they gene positive?
Yeah.
We don't know.
Yeah, no, I know. I don't know if Dr. Priori, she does all the work. I see her every year. And they found it. And then the other question: are we more our mother than our father based on the thing?
Only for your mitochondria.
But you don't get anything just from your dad's side, right?
You need a Y chromosome just from your dad.
But that's like 50. And then you get this extra thing from your mom, right?
I don't know. I mean,
because people always say you're like half your mom, half your dad.
Not really, because the genes that are on your mitochondria are simply for those little energy.
Okay.
So you're not gonna. There's no phenotype other than the energy level of your cells.
Thank you.
Yep.
So I was in the NICU and hypothyroidism chemicals, which I guess is really rare.
Yeah.
So that endocrinologist said. But I was reading about it, and it said that it was passed from the dad, and this was a daughter. So like, how did that occur? I mean, because I was thinking, like, does that technically mean it's Y-linked or something?
No, so if it's going from dad to daughter, and I'm not even 100% certain if that's inherited category, my immediate thought would be that it's not X-linked. But if it's going from dad to daughter, the only way that you could have that is having a dominant condition that has an X that has a mutation in it, and then for his daughter to be affected, he passes on that one copy of the X with the mutation in it, and because it's a dominant condition, an X-linked dominant condition, or a second copy of the X for mom.
Right.
But I'm not 100%.
Okay, and how would you be able to, you were saying that if we have I don't remember if it's X, if we have, for like a girl, if we have one that is affected and one that is not, and we turn off the gene that is affected, like how do we know which one is the affected or which one is the one with the problem?
So our cells recognize the damage that is present in that particular chromosome and that particular gene, and it's non-functional. So our cells know I need to have a copy of this gene that works, and so I mean I'm simplifying it all, but yes, we have it. Yeah. Exactly, our cells have brains that are then able to recognize that.
Okay, but that there's the fact that there's a problem with it, or like you said, like there's an issue with that gene. I mean, how do we know that if it's just like a transposition, or do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If it's not necessarily like a deletion or something.
So it really has to do with our cells' consent, the fact that we need to, so even though, for example, it might be a gene that's not important in that particular cell. So let's say, for example, we're talking about Duchenne muscular dystrophy. It's a muscular dystrophy, but if you took a sample of the blood and you looked at the leukocytes that are the ones that have a nucleus in the blood, so our white blood cells, we would see that in women who are carriers of Duchenne muscular dystrophy, the X with the mutation on it is preferentially turned off. Turned off is actually you methylize everything. So the methylization process actually makes it so you're no longer reading the DNA strand on that particular chromosome. And it's really, there's a lot of mechanisms that are
I'm sure,
involved in
yeah.
lionization that we don't understand about. What we really, it wasn't so much that we learned that this was turned off, but in fact, it was more kind of the reverse of that. We're taking blood samples from women who are carriers of excellent conditions and seeing that they're preferentially methylating
Right.
a particular.
So you know that they're a carrier.
We know, yeah, we know they're a carrier, and we
Of a
see that
dominant
they,
trait, right? An
yeah,
X-dominant.
X-linked dominant trait, and we see that they're preferentially turning off or
The one with the
methylating an X chromosome. We don't actually necessarily know that the copy that they're turning on is the one with the mutation. We just presume that
Because they don't
they're
have the trait.
skewing. Yeah, exactly. Whereas for someone who is not a
Yeah.
carrier, there's even methylation of either X chromosome.
Cool, okay. Great, thank you.
Good luck.
Okay, see you next week.
It is, you just go from there and it'll say, cool, basic stuff. It's like, it's so, I don't think you might have tried for an H plus, so I don't know if people know about that. You just go through the names. And again, it's not trying to trick you or test what you know by rote, because you forget it 2 months from now. It's being able to access resources and recognizing that the resources in there are important and encouraging you to take those modules with you to use later down the road. And each module is 2 months. I'll post it next week, and you have 5 days.
In, when we go through its friends,